The Paris Peace Conference was convened in early 1919 to reach peace agreements with Germany, Bulgaria, Turkey, Austria-Hungary, and to determine the terms of post-war peace. The Peace Conference also discussed the Armenian issue. On August 10, 1920, in the Parisian suburb of Sèvres, the Allied powers, including the Republic of Armenia, signed a peace treaty with the Ottoman Turkish Empire. According to the Treaty of Sevres, the centuries-old dream of the Armenian people seemed to be on the path of realization. By the reunification of Western and Eastern Armenia, a united and independent Armenia was to be created. On November 22, 1920, US President Woodrow Wilson issued an arbitral award on the redrawing of the Armenian-Turkish border. This decision, which was valid from its moment of signing, has not been implemented to this day. 100 years after the signing, the Treaty of Sevres also awaits its proper fulfillment. The Paris Peace Conference began its work on January 18, 1919, and with minor interruptions, it continued its deliberation until January 21, 1920. About 2,000 delegates from 27 countries participated at the conference. The conference was chaired by the Prime Minister of France, Georges Clemenceau. During the conference, the decisive role was played by the leaders of the United States, Great Britain, France, and Italy, collectively known as the Council of the Big Four. Delegates were invited to the meetings of the Council only when issues concerning them were discussed. Though the Republic of Armenia did not receive an official invitation to participate in the conference, it was encouraged by the hope that the blood shed by the Armenians for the Allies would be appreciated, and that Western Armenia would finally gain its freedom and independence. The Armenian people gained this right through their military cooperation with the Allied powers in World War I. In the ranks of the Russian army alone, the number of Armenian fighters exceeded 200,000, while thousands of Armenians fought in the armies of the other Allied forces, including the United States and Canada. The government of the Republic of Armenia and the Western Armenians sent delegations to Paris. The Armenian delegation included Avedis Aharonyan as the president of the delegation, along with Mikhail Babajanian and Hama Ohanjanian. The delegation of Western Armenians was headed by the wealthy Egyptian Armenian entrepreneur Boghos Nubar Pasha. The delegation consisted of Arshak Jopanian, Vahan Tekeyan, and others. In Paris, the Armenian delegations convened separate meetings with the diplomatic representatives of different countries. Still, the conference itself did not formally acknowledge the Armenian delegates, and as a result, Armenians in the diaspora protested this move through peaceful demonstrations in Paris, Switzerland, England, Italy, Belgium, and other European countries. On February 10, 1919, Aharonyan met with the French Foreign Minister Stéphane Pichon and presented the participation of Armenians during World War I. In the Caucasus, we alone seized the front left by the Russians, which, I can say proudly for my nation, became the Armenian Front. For the whole 8 months we fought against the Turkish-Tatar-Kurdish coalition, for the sake of the Allies, for the sake of France. Aharonyan noted that the Armenian people had suffered great hardships, but spared no effort in fighting the common enemies of the Allies. He especially emphasized the military role of the Armenians after the Bolshevik Revolution and the departure of the Russians. On February 12, 1919, after heated discussions and debates, Chairman of the delegation of the Republic of Armenia, Avedis Aharonyan, and the chairman of the delegation of Western Armenians, Boghos Nubar, signed and sent a memorandum to the Paris Peace Conference, containing all the demands of the Armenian people. A few days later, on February 25th, the Council of 10 finally listened to the presidents of the two Armenian delegations and adopted the Memorandum of Armenian Demands with a map of united Armenia. Independent Armenia should have had the following borders: the vilayets of Van, Bitlis, Diyarbakir, Kharpert, Sivas, Erzurum, Trabzon, the four zankags of Gilikia, Marash, Gozan, Sis, Jebel Bereket, and Adana, with the port of Alexandret. The Republic of Armenia in the Caucasus, including the province of Yerevan, the southern part of the province of Tbilisi, Lori, and Akhalkalaki, the southwestern part of the province of Elizavetpol, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Zangezur, and the Kars region, except for northern Ardahan. The Armenian representatives distribute the memorandum they have drawn up to the members of the assembly, where not only the borders of Armenia were mentioned, but also the issue of the mandate was highlighted. Armenia should have been placed under a general, collective mandate of the Allies, or the League of Nations, for at least 20 years. The Big Four discussed the Armenian issue in March 1919. During a session convened on May 14th, they decided to hand over the mandate for Armenia to the United States of America. US President Woodrow Wilson agreed to take the mandate along with Constantinople, the Straits of the Black Sea, the Marmara Sea, and the surrounding areas. The United States commissioned an investigative assessment to study the process of taking over some parts of the former Ottoman Empire. For that purpose, on June 10, 1919, Charles Crane and Henry King left for Turkey as plenipotentiaries of the Paris Peace Conference. However, their subsequent reports did not become the subject of diplomatic discussions during the conference. In addition, the reports did not answer all the questions concerning the US president. Therefore, to comprehensively study the issues related to the mandate for Armenia and submit a report to the Congress in accordance with Wilson's decision, in September 1919, a new US delegation led by General James Harbord was sent to Transcaucasia and Asia Minor. The delegation toured Asia Minor and Transcaucasia for 30 days, passing through Constantinople, Kilikia, Syria, the provinces of Western Armenia, Kars, Sarıkamış, Yerevan, and Echmiadzin, where they met with the Gatorigos of all Armenians, George V. Afterward, the delegation headed to Tbilisi, Batumi, and other strategic locations in Georgia. At Harbord's request, the Armenian government issued a comprehensive report answering 40 questions of interest to the American government. A comprehensive report on the findings of the delegation was submitted to the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Senate on October 16, 1919. The report suggested uniting Constantinople, Asia Minor, Armenia, and Transcaucasia under the long-term patronage of the United States. In its essence, this unification program was ultimately pro-Turkish and in fact resembled the Turkish program of the Caucasian House. It was no coincidence that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk supported the idea of a united mandate. As the issue of a mandate for Armenia was being deliberated, it was important for Armenia to be recognized as an independent state by the European powers and the United States. In the autumn of 1919, the issue of recognizing the independence of Transcaucasian republics was a topic of serious discussion for all the Allied powers. The recognition of the Republic of Armenia was directly linked with post-war agreements that were to be signed with Turkey and with Armenia's determination in the fight against the Bolsheviks. Eventually, at a meeting of the leaders of the United States, Great Britain, France, Italy, and Japan, who convened on January 19, 1920 in Paris, it was decided to recognize the government of Armenia on the condition that recognition cannot predetermine the issue of the final borders of that state. In 1920, Armenia found itself in a position that corresponded with the political interests of the Allies, the Bolsheviks, and Turkey. At the time, the interests of all the great powers were clashing over Turkey, and the issue of Armenia's mandate depended on the signing of an agreement with the Ottoman Empire. The conference held between the Allied powers in the Italian city of San Remo in April 1920 was a significant step in that direction. In San Remo, the draft for a peace treaty with the Ottoman Empire was finally discussed and outlined. The issue of Western Armenia was also discussed in more detail. For that reason, the heads of the two Armenian delegations, Averis Aharonian and Boğaz Nubar Pasha, were invited to San Remo.
In April 1920, when the future of Sèvres was outlined, at the San Remo talks, the greater powers of the world who had defeated the German group assured that Armenia had no problem. The countries that won the war see the solution to the Armenian issue in the way of connecting the two parts of Armenia.
The delegates at the San Remo conference were already aware that there were objections in the US Senate regarding Wilson's proposals. At the San Remo conference, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Lloyd George, stated that if the United States did not take over the mandate for Armenia, it would not be possible to consider the creation of a Greater Armenia. He suggested postponing the settlement until the final decision is made by the United States. The Supreme Council of the Allied Powers made such a proposal to the US government and personally to Woodrow Wilson as an independent and completely impartial arbitrator to determine the issue of Armenia's borders. The Supreme Council was particularly interested about which part of the vilayets of Erzurum, Trabzon, Van, and Bitlis should be annexed to the existing Armenian state. President Wilson soon replied that he agrees to take on the legal mission of defining Armenia's borders. And on April 23, 1920, the US government finally recognized the government of the Republic of Armenia without predetermining the borders of the state.
There's also a problem with Wilson. The thing is that it was about the American mandate on the American territories. It was an important problem, especially for the Bolsheviks, who viewed it from the point of view of imperialism and were against it. But the US Congress did not accept Armenia's mandate. Otherwise, Armenia would remain under American protection, as with Iraq under Britain, Syria and Lebanon under Francis.
Disagreement between the Allied powers over the partition of the Asian territories in Turkey forced them to postpone the signing of a peace treaty. It was finally signed on August 10, 1920 in the Parisian suburb of Sèvres. The Armenian delegation led by Avris Aharonyan became one of the signatories on the agreement with the Ottoman Turkish Empire. The Treaty of Sevres consisted of 13 chapters encompassing 433 articles. Articles 88 through 93 of Section 6 and Chapter 3 were solely dedicated to Armenia. Articles 125, 142, 144, 251, 252, and 277 were also related to Armenia. According to Article 88 of the treaty, Turkey and Armenia, as well as other parties to the agreement, agreed to leave the redrawing of the Turkish-Armenian border between Erzurum, Trabzon, Van, and Bitlis to the arbitration of the US president. They also agreed with Wilson's offer to give Armenia access to the sea and to demilitarize any Ottoman territories crossing the mentioned border. According to Article 90 of the treaty, starting from the date of the demarcation of the border, Turkey would relinquish all rights to the territory ceded to Armenia. Article 92 of the treaty stipulated that the borders of Azerbaijan and Armenia with Georgia will be determined through direct negotiations with those states. In case of disagreement, the border would be determined by the main Allied powers, provided that the demarcation will be agreed upon during the time of negotiation.
It was a big territory. Most of Van Vilayet, most of Trabzon, Erzurum, Bitlis, facing the Black Sea. There was supposed to be a railway to be built through the territory of Georgia. Accordingly, the territory was provided in the Batumi port for the possibility of Armenian trade and foreign relations. In addition, there was an important episode about the creation of a Kurdish state. However, this issue remained at the discretion of the Turkish state and the responsibility of the Entente states.
Additionally, Article 252 provided free access to Armenia via the port of Trabzon. It was determined that a section at the port of Trabzon would be permanently leased to Armenia and placed under the general control of the free zones established by the Treaty of Sevres. As for Gilikia, to which the Armenian side also had ambitions, the Treaty of Sevres did not incorporate it into the emerging Armenian state. But, as noted in the US Congress, it was understood that Gilikia should have an autonomous government under French patronage. According to this treaty, it seemed that the centuries-old dream of a free, independent, and united Armenia would be realized. However, these were false hopes, and even a century later, they are still not a reality.
As for the treaty itself, it aimed at a just settlement of both the Armenian issue and the Kurdish issue. Both questions still hang in the air.
The signing of the treaty failed to demonstrate that the differences between the Allied powers in Asia Minor had been resolved. On the contrary, they became clearer and insurmountable. All of them already knew that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk had a well-armed and disciplined 150,000-strong army under his command, against which none of the European allies intended to use weapons. At the time of the signing of the treaty, the rearrangement of the political forces served Turkey's interests. The resolute anti-Turkish position of the European powers was replaced by a policy of finding a common ground with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and directing him against Soviet Russia. In turn, the Kemalists, attempting to entertain the interests of both sides, began a closer relationship with Soviet Russia.
The Western countries that signed the treaty, of course there were some biases in their actions, that we are handing over your homeland to you on a documentary basis, and we want to see a strong Armenia in the future. Maybe there was a genuine desire for England because it was very much in favor of Armenia becoming a powerful ally. That was a country of 160,000 square kilometers with access to the sea. This was important for Britain, and it is no coincidence that Lloyd George told the Armenian delegations during the negotiations to pay more attention to Trabzon than to Erzurum because the Turks were strong there. The genocide took place in a more terrible way. The Armenians were uprooted from that area, and access to the sea is important. The West was also beginning to be wary. Had they also used military force in favor of Armenia, and Articles 88-93 of the treaty were implemented, suddenly that powerful Armenia could become Soviet and they will create an opposing force for themselves. Meanwhile, relations between Soviet Russia and the Middle East were extremely strained. The Turks were largely saved by the Bolsheviks, and this is the truth. The letter that Kemal addressed to Lenin went quite a long way, but reached to the addressee. In the letter, the leader of the Turkish national movement assured that he was ready to fight together with the Bolsheviks against imperialism, the Entente and common enemies. And it is natural that the Bolsheviks reacted to that. There was a theory of permanent revolution, the main bearer of which was Trotsky at the time. Here, Turkey was seen as a window to the Islamic world, a bridge to the East for a complete world revolution. Moreover, Kemal supported this idea. Although the Bolsheviks soberly believed that this was in fact the capitalist path, there was still the phrase transition from capitalism to socialism, which at the time was considered modern for the leadership of Soviet Russia.
There were several other reasons for not implementing the Treaty of Sevres. The implementation of the treaty could have led to unforeseen difficulties in the region, as European countries did not have the political will nor a common position on Turkey, which, despite its defeat in the war, had committed the systematic genocide of 1.5 million Armenians and other Christians in the region.
Of course, the Treaty of Sevres was aimed at restoring justice and should have facilitated the return of the survivors of the Armenian genocide. Those who remained, let us remember that only Russia gave shelter to 400,000 Armenians. Nevertheless, that did not happen. The treaty was not ratified, not only by the Ottoman Empire, but it must be said that the government of that time had no influence, and the parliament was simply dissolved by the Entente states. Thus, the significance of the Treaty of Sevres, as well as the decisions proposed by Wilson, had only a moral significance for modern man. The problem could have been solved fairly, but it was not solved. And the Treaty of Lausanne confirmed what there is now. The result was one: not only the Armenians were not allowed to return, but also they continued to be destroyed. Many Armenians converted to Islam or became Alevis in order to survive. That is why there are many Armenians among the Iranian-speaking Zaza people living in Turkey, whom the Kurds consider Kurds, and they consider themselves a separate nation.
Years later, the greatest friend of the Armenian people, Nobel laureate Fridtjof Nansen, said, "Pity to the Armenians who have ever been involved in European politics. It would have been much better for them if the word Armenia was never uttered by any European diplomat." And so, Europe gradually abandoned its cherished plan to divide the Asian territories of Turkey. Only US President Wilson maintained his conviction that the presence of Turks in Europe is unnatural. Faithful to that conviction, Wilson signed his arbitral award on November 22, 1920, which was officially handed over to the Supreme Council of the Allied Powers on December 6th. Decision of the President of the United States of America on the demilitarization of the Turkish-Armenian border, Armenia's access to the sea and the Turkish territory adjacent to the Armenian border, November 22, 1920. According to Wilson's decision, the Armenian-Turkish border. It starts from the Black Sea, east of Kherson, descends to the south, to the knee of the Euphrates, near Pengan, leaning to the east, approaching Burak, on the mountain range of Manzur, Dersim, then moving from south to east, crosses Aradzani near Genj, then crosses with the Armenian Taurus to the east and reaches the Persian border near Banama. Thus, United Armenia was to receive from Western Armenia 2/3 of the provinces of Van and Bitlis, almost the entire province of Erzurum, most of the province of Trabzon, including the port. In total, that area was to be 19,000 square kilometers. Uniting with the already existing Republic of Armenia in the Transcaucasus, the area of which was 71,330 square kilometers, the independent Armenian state would have a total area of 161,330 square kilometers with an access to the sea.
As an arbitrator, the arbitrator shall have jurisdiction by agreement of the parties. When Turkey and Armenia signed the Sèvres Treaty, they actually gave the power to President Wilson to decide on the border passing through 4 vilayets. Article 90 of the agreement states that when the arbitrator determines the frontier involving the transfer of the whole or any part of the territory of the said vilayets to the Republic of Armenia, Turkey would renounce, as from the date of such decision, all rights and title over the territory so transferred.
Both the Treaty of Sevres and the arbitral award of the President of the United States have not yet been implemented. These documents are a testament to the international recognition of the rights of the Armenian people over the territories of Western Armenia. Even 100 years later, they deserve serious international legal and political consideration. It is never too late to rectify the mistakes of the past, especially in this case, when Turkey, encouraged by its unpunished genocidal crimes, continues to threaten Europe while continuing to commit new crimes.
Wilson's legal judgment was given at a time when the Treaty of Sèvres was a valid treaty. No one had rejected it, there was no time limit for its ratification, no one had objected to its ratification, so as an arbitration, it is considered a legal judgment. It is an arbitration principle that no matter what the fate of the contract becomes, the article on arbitration is considered an independent article that will remain in force even if the contract itself is annulled. Therefore, regardless of everything, this article continued and remains in force, and the decision was made during the ratification period of the treaty.
The 18 major signatories to the document not only de jure record Armenia's right to Western Armenia, but also continue to keep the treaty in their archives and use it from time to time in the event of a deterioration in relations with Turkey, as the United States has done in terms of setting up bases in Turkey. The Middle East is entering a new stage of development when the emergence of new territories of states begins, the blow of schism, the events with Iran. Moreover, I think all these geopolitical developments will lead to the need for a new treaty that will repeat the Treaty of Sevres. This will create a new East, and the Treaty of Sevres should be considered as a precedent. The leaders of many European countries say they need a new Sevres Treaty, which is difficult now, but requires major developments that should take place soon.
International analysts have long spoken of Turkey's Severus Syndrome. For 100 years, Ankara has been doing its best not to return to Sèvres, and it is no coincidence that the word Sèvres causes panic in Ankara. Severus Syndrome. A popular belief in Turkish society according to which the external forces, especially the West, aim to weaken and dismantle Turkey. According to Turkish historian Taner Aktam, the Severus Syndrome is itself a widespread fear among the people that there are forces that are constantly trying to destroy us, that the Turkish state must be protected from such dangers.
The fear that they lost after the war has penetrated very deeply into the perception of the Turkish elite. 100 years have passed, but that fear seems real in Turkey, because a terrible event took place in Sèvres from the Turkish point of view, which was against them. They were left alone and had to sign the treaty in a defeated state. Now, they have the fear of being left alone and the fear of returning territories, and that is called Severus Syndrome. This fear is present in many Turkish leaders, such as Erdogan, who is known for his belligerent statements, mentioning Severus several times a year. I think that 100 years after the signing of the treaty, there are much greater prospects for its implementation, because the policy of the Turkish leadership, zero problems with neighboring countries, has completely failed. Today, the Turks have bad relations even with the neighboring Georgians, not to mention other Arab states, which some time ago thought that Turkey had become the leader of the Islamic world and they should be guided by it. But now, their relations are extremely tense. The conditions of the Lausanne Conference are not acceptable for us, and we should not be satisfied only with Ardahan, and the region of Batumi also belongs to us. I will not deny the current situation. We can use it to our advantage. We must pursue the implementation of the issue of the Treaty of Sevres and be guided by the legal basis, which is the legal judgment of Woodrow Wilson, according to which most of Trabzon, Bitlis, Van Vilayets will pass to us.
Thus, the non-implementation of the Sèvres Treaty and Woodrow Wilson's arbitral award have been affecting geopolitical realities and Eurasian regional security for 100 years. All this is becoming more and more obvious. Also, as a result, today the Middle East has turned into a boiling cauldron and Turkey has become even more unbridled and ambitious.
According to the Treaty of Sevres, the Armenian Plateau and the Republic of Armenia will occupy a position that will be dominant in the modern Middle East, a large Christian state that will rule from the north to the east. Apart from its geographical significance, it also has geopolitical significance. This was also taken into account by President Wilson and the group that worked on the treaty.
The Kurdish people's right to self-determination, which was first formulated in the form of a treaty in 1920, has not become a reality as well. It guaranteed the right of autonomy for the Kurds within Turkey. After a year, this autonomous formation with the consent of the League of Nations could have become an independent state.
And for the Kurds and the Armenians, the Treaty of Sevres was a hope, a very strong hope that did not come true. Thank God there is an Armenian state, an independent state, or rather two, namely Nagorno-Karabakh, who live in the most difficult conditions, including the blockade created by Azerbaijan and Turkey. Fight for their independence and remember the Treaty of Sevres, which is one of the most important pages in their history, though unrealized, but the hope that millions of deported Armenians can return to their homeland remains. Historical logic tells us that eventually Kurdish states will emerge. Such a large nation cannot have no statehood. In this regard, the treaty is becoming more relevant. This is the only international document that speaks about the independence, rights, and statehood of the Kurds. When this becomes a reality, the great powers of the world will refer to the Treaty of Sevres. It will become a document on the discussion table again, and we must be ready for it. It is no coincidence that none of the signatory countries renounce Sevres. These countries have an interest in Turkey, and by keeping agreement in the archives, they keep a trump card in their relations with Turkey. Now, the Armenian issue is perceived as a problem of territories and receiving material compensation, which is more important. Sèvres has a special place in the history of our nation. The Treaty of Sevres is the historical legacy of the international powers of the world community towards Armenia and the Armenian people. For the ARF, the borders of the treaty are our cornerstone of land claims, and naturally, we notice that it has a special place. And this year, as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the treaty, we must better present the value and President Wilson's arbitral award to the world community. In recent years, the land issue has been a priority for the ARF. We have the vision of a whole Armenia, and we have opened a new page in that direction. Besides the political platform, we also have the legal side. Let's hope that the day will come when the Republic of Armenia will take this issue seriously.
The Pan-Armenian Declaration on the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, appreciating the joint declaration of the Allied powers on May 24, 1915, for the first time in history defining the most heinous crime perpetrated against the Armenian people as a crime against humanity and civilization, and emphasizing the necessity of holding Ottoman authorities responsible, as well as the role and significance of the Sèvres Peace Treaty of August 10, 1920, and U.S. President Woodrow Wilson's Arbitral Award of November 22, 1920, in overcoming the consequences of the Armenian Genocide. Commemorates 1.5 million innocent victims of the Armenian Genocide and bows in gratitude before those martyred and surviving heroes who struggled for their lives and human dignity. Reiterates the commitment of Armenia and the Armenian people to continue the international struggle for the prevention of genocides, the restoration of the rights of people subjected to genocide, and the establishment of historical justice. Wilson's Arbitral Award is final and binding. It has no expiration date, and its status does not depend on the future of the judgment. International law, in particular the Hague Convention's Article 81, which summarizes and enshrines the status of arbitral awards, does not provide for the annulment of such a judgment.